A hush falls over the charity gala as she enters. Annalise, 7 months pregnant and radiant in emerald silk, her hand instinctively resting on her swollen belly. Her husband, the millionaire titan Julian Croft, is by her side, the epitome of devotion. But then, across the crowded room, a flash of familiar brilliance catches her eye. On the hand of a stunning redhead, draped in diamonds, is a ring, her wedding ring, the one-of-a-kind, custom-made symbol of her life, her love, her future. In that gut-wrenching moment, her perfect world shatters. But this is not a story of a woman broken. This is the story of a wife's cold, calculated revenge that will bring a king to his knees, weeping amongst the ruins of his empire. Annalise had always believed their life was a fairy tale. She'd met Julian Croft at a Sotheby's auction where she was a junior art appraiser, and he was the enigmatic billionaire bidding on a rare Monet. He hadn't won the painting, but he had, in his own words, won the greatest prize in the room. Their courtship was a whirlwind of private jets to Paris for dinner, surprise trips to see the northern lights from a glass igloo in Finland, and a proposal on a private yacht in the shadow of the Amalfi coast. He was charming, attentive, and utterly intoxicating. Their wedding was the stuff of legends, a multi-million-dollar affair at the Ohika Castle on Long Island, featured in the glossy pages of Vogue. Julian had presented her with the ring, a breathtaking 7-carat, cushion-cut diamond, flanked by 2 rare pink diamonds set in a custom-designed platinum band that mirrored the scrollwork of the castle's gates. "A ring for a queen," he had whispered, his blue eyes earnest. "A symbol of a love as unique and unbreakable as this diamond." Annalise, a woman who had grown up in a modest suburban home, was swept away by the sheer grandeur of it all, but more so by the seeming sincerity in his gaze. Life as Mrs. Croft was lived in a gilded cage, though for the first few years, Annalise only saw the gold. Their penthouse on Park Avenue offered panoramic views of Central Park, a canvas that changed with the seasons. Their staff, a silent, efficient army, catered to their every whim. She had a black Amex with no limit, a personal shopper at Bergdorf's, and a garage filled with cars she rarely drove. Julian was a demanding husband, his schedule packed with international business trips and high-stakes meetings. But he always made time for her, or so it seemed. He'd fly home from Tokyo just to have dinner with her, showering her with lavish gifts that served as glittering apologies for his absence. He was the architect of her life, and she, in her love-dazed state, had willingly handed him the blueprints. He encouraged her to leave her job at Sotheby's, arguing that a Croft shouldn't be working for anyone else. He suggested she focus on philanthropy, a more suitable role for a woman of her new stature. Annalise, eager to please the man she adored, had agreed. She poured her energy into chairing committees for children's hospitals and art foundations, her name becoming synonymous with high society charity. The first crack in the gilded facade appeared subtly. It was a stray text message she glimpsed on his phone late one night. "You left your watch here." The name was unfamiliar, KV. When she'd casually asked about it the next morning, Julian had been smooth dismissive. KV. "Oh, Ken Velocity, one of my VPs. We were working late at the office. He's a bit of a mess, always leaving things behind." It was a plausible lie delivered with the easy confidence of a man who rarely had to explain himself. Annalise, wanting to believe him, let it go. But then came other things. The scent of a perfume that wasn't hers, lingering on his suit jacket. A heady, musky scent, so different from her light floral fragrances. The late-night board meetings that stretched into the early hours of the morning. The hushed phone calls he would take on the terrace, his back turned to her, his voice a low, urgent murmur. Each instance was a small stone dropped into the placid pool of her marriage, sending out ripples of unease. When she told him she was pregnant, Julian had been ecstatic, or at least he'd performed the part convincingly. He'd swept her up in his arms, his eyes shining with what she took for joyous tears. A son, he'd boomed, already certain of the gender. An heir to the Croft empire. He became even more attentive, if that were possible. He hired a private chef to cater to her pregnancy cravings, a prenatal yoga instructor, and a team of the best doctors in New York City. He would rest his hand on her growing belly, a proprietary gesture that she found both comforting and vaguely unsettling. "My two most precious assets," he would say, his voice thick with a satisfaction that in hindsight felt more like a banker admiring his portfolio than a husband cherishing his family. Yet even amidst the flurry of preparations for the baby, the disconnect grew. He was physically present more often, but emotionally he seemed 1,000 miles away. He was more guarded with his phone, his laptop always angled away from her. The business trips became more frequent now, with the added excuse of securing the legacy for our son. He went to Singapore, to Dubai, to London. Annalise, grounded by her advancing pregnancy, was left behind in the silent, opulent penthouse, the city lights glittering below like a sea of distant stars. It was during his last trip, a supposed 3-day conference in Geneva, that the lie began to unravel completely. He called her every night, his voice a warm caress over the phone lines, telling her how much he missed her, how he couldn't wait to come home to his beautiful wife and their unborn child. On the second night, while they were talking, she heard a faint sound in the background, the distinctive chime of the funicular at the Grand Hotel Victoria in Interlaken, a sound she remembered vividly from a trip they had taken early in their relationship. Geneva was miles from Interlaken. "Where are you, Julian? It sounds so lovely," she'd asked, her voice light, betraying none of the cold dread that was beginning to seep into her veins. There was a split second of silence, a digital void that stretched for an eternity. "Just in the hotel lobby, darling," he'd replied, his voice a little too loud, a little too jovial. "It's quite a grand place. Reminds me a little of that spot in Interlaken, actually. Funny you should say that." Funny. That night, Annalise didn't sleep. The gilded cage had begun to feel like a prison, the panoramic views mocking her confinement. She thought of her wedding ring, the weighty symbol of their unbreakable love, sitting on her finger. She had taken it off a week ago, her fingers too swollen from the pregnancy. It sat in its velvet box in their wall safe, waiting. Julian had noticed its absence and insisted she wear it on a chain around her neck, but she had refused, saying it was uncomfortable. The truth was, she couldn't bear the feel of it against her skin. The cold metal, a constant reminder of the chilling distance growing between them. The day of the annual Miracles for Kids gala, the flagship event of her philanthropic calendar, arrived. Julian had flown back from Geneva that morning, looking tanned and refreshed. He presented her with an obscenely large bouquet of her favorite white peonies and a new diamond necklace. "To adorn my beautiful queen tonight," he'd said, his smile never quite reaching his eyes. Annalise played her part, the adoring, expectant wife. She allowed him to fasten the necklace around her neck, her skin crawling at his touch. She smiled and thanked him, her heart a leaden weight in her chest. As she got ready, her glam squad, a team of 4 who descended upon the penthouse like a whirlwind of hairspray and couture, chattered excitedly around her. They dressed her in a custom-made emerald silk gown by Brandon Maxwell, the deep green hue complementing her auburn hair. The fabric skimmed her baby bump, a testament to the life she was carrying, a life she would protect with the ferocity of a lioness. As she surveyed her reflection in the mirror, she saw a woman she barely recognized. The naivety was gone from her eyes, replaced by a hard, crystalline clarity. The fairy tale was over. She was the queen of a crumbling castle, married to a king of lies. And as she prepared to step into the public eye to play her role on the grand stage of New York society, she had no idea that tonight the final brutal truth would be revealed not in a hushed whisper, but in the audacious, blinding sparkle of her own wedding ring on another woman's hand. She felt a grim resolve settle over her. The gilded cage was about to be blown wide open, and she would be the one holding the dynamite. The ballroom at the Plaza Hotel was a sea of glittering opulence. Crystal chandeliers dripping with thousands of hand-cut prisms cast a warm, golden glow over the city's elite. The air hummed with the murmur of polite conversation, the clinking of champagne flutes, and the soft strains of a string quartet. Annalise moved through the crowd with a practiced grace, her hand linked through Julian's arm. She smiled, she nodded. She accepted compliments on her gown and her radiant pregnancy glow. Each smile felt like a crack in a carefully constructed mask. Julian was in his element, the master of this universe. He greeted fellow titans of industry with firm handshakes and powerful men in politics with knowing smiles. He introduced Annalise with a possessive pride, his hand always resting on the small of her back, or more frequently, on her stomach. "My brilliant wife, Annalise," he would say, "the heart of my world and the mother of my future." People would coo, impressed by the public display of affection, the picture of a perfect, powerful couple. Annalise felt like a prop in his elaborate stage play. She scanned the faces in the crowd, a knot of anxiety tightening in her chest. Every beautiful woman who laughed a little too long at Julian's jokes, every admiring glance that lingered on him sent a jolt of suspicion through her. Was it her or her? The paranoia was a bitter taste in her mouth, a stark contrast to the sweet champagne she couldn't drink. They took their seats at the head table, a position of honor befitting their status as the event's primary benefactors. Annalise was seated between Julian and a desiccated old-money matron whose diamonds looked as ancient as her lineage. The program began a series of speeches and a heart-wrenching video about the children the foundation helped. Annalise watched, her heart genuinely moved, but her mind was elsewhere. It was a strange, disorienting duality to be so publicly celebrated for her compassion, while her private world was consumed by a cold, burgeoning rage. Julian leaned over, his breath warm against her ear. "You've outdone yourself this year, my love. A record-breaking fundraiser." He squeezed her thigh under the table, a gesture that was meant to be intimate but felt invasive. "We make a damn good team." Annalise simply smiled, a tight, brittle thing. "It's all for the children," she said, her voice a placid surface above a churning abyss of turmoil. It was during the live auction, the centerpiece of the evening's fundraising, that her world finally imploded. The auctioneer was a fast-talking, charismatic man, coaxing bids from the city's wealthiest patrons for extravagant prizes a week on a private island, a walk-on role in a Hollywood blockbuster, a vintage Porsche. Julian Ever the Showman was an active participant, his hand shooting up to place ever higher bids, drawing gasps and applause from the crowd. He had just won a private dinner for 10, cooked by the world-renowned chef Daniel Hum of 11 Madison Park, for a staggering $200,000. A wave of applause erupted, and Julian stood to take a bow, a magnanimous smile plastered on his face. As he settled back into his seat, basking in the glow of his public largesse, Annalise's gaze drifted across the room. And then she saw her. She was standing near the back of the ballroom, partially obscured by a large floral arrangement. A striking redhead, with a cascade of fiery curls, poured into a swan-red dress that clung to her every curve. She was laughing, her head thrown back, a flute of champagne held aloft in a slender, elegant hand. And on that hand, on the third finger, was a flash of brilliance that was as familiar to Annalise as her own reflection. Time seemed to slow down. The auctioneer's patter faded into a distant buzz. The murmuring of the crowd became a dull roar. Annalise's entire being focused on that single searing point of light. It couldn't be. Her mind rebelled, searching for a rational explanation. It was a similar ring, a coincidence, a cruel trick of the light. But she knew. She knew the way the light caught the facets of the cushion-cut diamond. She knew the fiery sparkle of the two rare pink diamonds that flanked it. She knew the intricate scrolling design of the platinum band, a design she had sketched herself. A design that was supposed to symbolize their unique, eternal love. It was her wedding ring, the one-of-a-kind masterpiece by the legendary jeweler Jar that Julian had commissioned for her. The ring that was supposed to be locked securely in their safe at home. The redhead lifted her hand to brush a stray curl from her face, and the ring caught the full glare of the chandelier. It was an audacious, ostentatious display. A declaration. The woman's eyes swept the room, and for a fleeting, terrifying moment, they met Annalise's. There was no flicker of recognition, no sign of guilt. Just a cool, appraising glance, the look of a victor surveying her territory. A wave of nausea so intense it almost buckled her, washed over Annalise. The air in the ballroom suddenly felt thick, suffocating. The emerald silk of her gown was a vice squeezing the breath from her lungs. This was KV. This was the woman whose perfume clung to her husband's suits. This was the woman he was with in Geneva, or rather, Interlaken. This was the woman who had not only stolen her husband, but had the audacity, the unmitigated gall to wear the symbol of her sacred vows on her own hand, in a room full of people who knew Annalise as Julian's wife. She turned to Julian, her movement stiff, robotic. He was oblivious, smiling at someone across the table, the picture of contentment. The betrayal was so profound, so brazen it was almost surreal. He hadn't just cheated on her. He had given this woman the most intimate, meaningful symbol of their marriage. He had, in effect, replaced her. Her vision tunneled. The room began to spin. She saw the redhead again, now talking to a man Annalise recognized as one of Julian's junior executives. She was animated, confident, the ring flashing with every gesture. It was a performance, and Annalise was the unwilling, unknowing audience. "Julian," she said, her voice a strangled whisper. It was a testament to her iron will that any sound came out at all. He turned to her, his smile faltering slightly at the sight of her pale, stricken face. "What is it, darling? Are you feeling unwell? Is it the baby?" "I need some air," she managed to say, her hand gripping the edge of the table to steady herself. "Of course," he said instantly, solicitous the concerned husband act snapping back into place. He stood and helped her to her feet, his touch now feeling like a brand on her skin. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said to the table, his voice smooth as silk. "My wife is feeling a little faint. Please excuse us." As he guided her out of the ballroom, his arm firmly around her. Annalise risked one last look over her shoulder. The redhead was watching them go, a small, knowing smirk playing on her lips. It was a look of triumph. They reached the relative quiet of the hotel's grand corridor, its marble floors and gilded mirrors reflecting their distorted images. Annalise pulled away from him, stumbling against a velvet settee. "Annalise, what's wrong?" Julian asked, his brow furrowed with a performance of concern. Annalise looked at him. Truly, looked at him for the first time in a long time. She saw the handsome face, the charming smile, the expensive, perfectly tailored tuxedo. But underneath it all, she saw the lie. She saw the hollowness, the deceit, the casual cruelty of a man who could so completely and utterly desecrate their life together. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. The shock was too deep, the betrayal too absolute for tears. A terrifying glacial calm settled over her. It was the calm of a dormant volcano, the pressure building, the magma churning just beneath the surface. "Who is she?" she asked, her voice eerily level. Julian's face went blank. "Who is who?" "Darling, you're not making any sense. You need to sit down. I'll get you some water." "The redhead," Annalise said, her eyes boring into his. "In the red dress, the one wearing my wedding ring." The color drained from Julian's face. For the first time since she had known him, the mask of confident control slipped, revealing a flicker of pure, unadulterated panic. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. The master manipulator, the king of lies, was for once speechless. Annalise didn't need his confession. The truth was there in his terrified eyes. It was there, glittering on another woman's hand in a crowded ballroom. The fairy tale hadn't just ended. It had been a lie from the very beginning. And in that moment, in the cold, gilded corridor of the Plaza Hotel, the heartbroken wife died, and a woman bent on revenge was born. The ride home in the back of the Maybach was a study in suffocating silence. The city lights smeared across the windows, a kaleidoscope of colors that Annalise didn't see. She sat pressed against her door, as far from Julian as the plush leather seats would allow. The glacial calm that had descended upon her in the hotel corridor had solidified into something harder, colder. It was the calm of a battlefield after the initial devastating volley, the air thick with the promise of more violence to come. Julian, for his part, attempted to fill the void with clumsy, desperate lies. It was a misunderstanding, Annalise. A terrible, terrible mistake. She's no one, a business acquaintance, who is obsessed, delusional. The ring. She must have had a replica made. It's insane, I know. I'll deal with it. I'll call security. Annalise remained silent, her gaze fixed on the passing cityscape. Every word he spoke was an insult to her intelligence, another shovelful of dirt on the grave of their marriage. A replica of a one-of-a-kind jar creation. The absurdity of it was almost laughable. He was treating her like an idiot, a hysterical pregnant woman who could be soothed with platitudes and pathetic falsehoods. He had no idea who he was sitting next to anymore. The compliant, adoring wife he had molded was gone. In her place was a stranger, a woman with ice in her veins and a storm gathering in her soul. When they arrived at the penthouse, the silence followed them, thick and menacing. The vast, art-filled rooms, once a source of pride and comfort, now felt like a mausoleum. Annalise walked directly to the master suite and stood before the walk-in closet, a room larger than most New York apartments. She began to pack. Not her own things. His. She pulled his Tom Ford suits from their hangers, the fabric a reminder of his scent, his presence. She let them fall to the floor in a heap. She swept his collection of Patek Philippe watches from their velvet-lined trays into a canvas laundry bag. She emptied his drawers of silk ties, monogrammed shirts, and cashmere sweaters. She worked with a methodical, dispassionate fury, her movements economical and precise. Julian watched her, his panic escalating into a frantic desperation. "Annalise, please stop this. Let's talk. We can fix this. Whatever you think you saw, it's not what it seems." She didn't grace him with a response. She was no longer a participant in his reality. She was creating her own. "It's the pregnancy," he said, his voice taking on a wheedling, condescending tone. "Your hormones are all over the place. You're being emotional. Let's just sleep on it. Everything will look different in the morning." That was the final straw. The casual, dismissive chauvinism of his words ignited the volcano. Annalise stopped her packing and turned to face him, her eyes blazing with a cold fire. "Emotional?" she said, her voice dangerously quiet. "You think I'm being emotional? Let me tell you what I'm feeling, Julian. I'm feeling clarity. For the first time in years. I see you. I see you for the pathetic, narcissistic, lying coward that you are." She picked up the canvas bag, heavy with his expensive watches. "You didn't just cheat on me, Julian. You gave her my ring. My ring. The one you said was a symbol of our unbreakable love. You took the most sacred promise we made, and you pinned it on your whore like a prize ribbon." She walked towards him, and for the first time he flinched, taking a step back. "You didn't just break my heart," she continued, her voice rising with each word. "You tried to break my spirit. You isolated me. You made me dependent on you. You turned me into a pretty accessory for your gilded life. And you thought I was too stupid, too weak, too emotional to ever see it." She was standing directly in front of him now, the full force of her fury directed at him. He looked smaller, somehow diminished. The powerful titan of industry was just a man, a cheating husband caught in a lie. "You're right about one thing," she said, her voice dropping back to a lethal whisper. "Things will look different in the morning, because in the morning you will be gone." She thrust the heavy bag into his chest. "Get out of my house." "Your house?" he sputtered, a flash of his old arrogance returning. "Annalise, be reasonable. This is my name on the deed, my money that paid for everything. You have nothing." A slow, chilling smile spread across Annalise's face. It was a smile that did not reach her eyes. "That's where you're wrong, Julian. I have something you never counted on. I have a brain. And while you were out playing games, I was learning. While you were building your empire, I was watching. I know your business. I know your secrets. I know where all the bodies are buried. You see, I was the perfect supportive wife. I listened during those endless dinner parties with your lawyers and your bankers. I read the documents you so carelessly left on your desk. I paid attention." The color drained from his face again. He had always underestimated her, seen her as a beautiful but ultimately decorative part of his life. He had never considered her a threat. "You have until sunrise to be gone," she said, her voice final. "Take what you can carry. The rest will be disposed of." With that, she turned her back on him and walked out of the room, leaving him standing amidst the ruins of his wardrobe, the dawning horror of his miscalculation finally sinking in. Annalise did not sleep. The adrenaline surging through her was a powerful stimulant. She went not to her own bedroom, but to the Home Office, a sleek, modern room that Julian had always considered his exclusive domain. She sat down in his large leather chair. It still felt warm. She booted up his computer. As she had predicted, He hadn't even bothered to log out. His arrogance was his Achilles heel. Her mind, once clouded by love and denial, was now a finely tuned instrument of vengeance. She was no longer just a scorned wife. She was the architect of ruin. Her first call was at 3 a.m. to her father, a retired, unassuming high school history teacher from Queens. He was the moral compass of her life. She told him everything, the words pouring out of her in a calm, steady stream. There was no hysteria, only the cold, hard facts. He didn't interrupt. He just listened. When she was done, there was a pause. "What do you need, Annie?" he asked, his voice a balm of unconditional support. "I need a warrior," she said. Her second call was to a name she had filed away in her memory from one of those long, tedious dinner parties, a name Julian had mentioned with a mixture of fear and respect. Delilah Vance, a notorious shark-like divorce attorney, known for eviscerating powerful men. Her specialty was forensic accounting, finding the money that philandering husbands tried to hide. Her slogan, whispered in hushed tones in the powder rooms of the Upper East Side, was, "I don't get you a settlement, I get you the company." Her third call was to a man named Marco. He was the head of her security detail, a former Mossad agent whom Julian had hired, but who had developed a quiet, paternal loyalty to Annalise. He was a man of few words and immense capability. "Marco," she said when he answered on the first ring, "I have a situation. I need you at the apartment in 1 hour, and I need a team, a discreet team." By the time the first pale light of dawn crept over the Manhattan skyline, Annalise's war room was assembled. Marco and his team, two grim-faced men who looked like they could walk through walls, had secured the apartment. They had escorted a stunned, disheveled Julian, carrying a single suitcase and a laundry bag of watches, out of the building. They had changed the locks, the codes, and swept the entire penthouse for listening devices. Annalise, still in her emerald silk gown from the night before, stood at the panoramic window, watching the sunrise. The city was waking up a sprawling, indifferent beast. But Annalise was not indifferent. She was focused. She was energized. She was about to go to war. She thought of the baby, kicking gently inside her. This was no longer just about her. It was about her child. Her child would not be raised in the shadow of a liar. Her child would not be a pawn in an empire of deceit. She would build her own empire, an empire of truth and strength on the ashes of Julian's. She looked at her reflection in the window. The woman staring back at her was a stranger forged in the fires of betrayal. The pain was still there, a deep, aching wound. But now it was overlaid with something else, a steely, unwavering resolve. She was no longer Julian Croft's wife. She was Annalise Varenne, her father's daughter. And she was about to become Julian Croft's reckoning. The game had just begun, and she was changing all the rules. The days that followed were a masterclass in calculated demolition. While Julian was likely holed up in a hotel suite, licking his wounds and underestimating her yet again, Annalise was assembling her army and laying the groundwork for his complete and utter ruin. The penthouse, once a symbol of her gilded captivity, became her command center. The dining room table where she had hosted countless insipid dinners for Julian's associates was now covered in laptops, legal documents, and financial statements. Her first meeting was with Delilah Vance. The lawyer was exactly as advertised, sharp, impeccably dressed in a steel-gray Armani suit, with eyes that seemed to see right through to the bottom line. She listened to Annalise's story without a flicker of emotion, her perfectly manicured fingers steepled under her chin. "The ring is a gift," Delilah said, her voice a low, precise purr. "Legally, it's his to give. Morally, it's a declaration of war. And in a war, we take no prisoners." She smiled, a flash of predatory brilliance. "You've come to the right place, Mrs. Croft. Or should I say, Miss Varenne." Ms. Varenne Annalise confirmed, a surge of strength coursing through her. "And I don't just want a divorce, Delilah. I want to dismantle him. I want to take away everything he values. His money, his reputation, his company." Delilah finished for her. "Standard procedure. What assets do we know about? And more importantly, what assets do we not know about?" This was where Annalise's years as the observant, underestimated wife paid off. She began to speak her memory, a steel trap. She detailed offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands that Julian had bragged about after too much single malt scotch. She recalled hushed conversations about shell corporations used to acquire properties in London and Hong Kong. She remembered the names of executives he'd paid off, the government contracts he'd secured through less than legal means, the creative accounting practices he'd joked about with his CFO. Delilah's eyes, which had been sharp before, now gleamed with the avaricious delight of a treasure hunter who had just been handed a map. "Ms. Varenne," she said, pulling a specialized encrypted laptop from her briefcase. "You are a goddamn gift. My forensic team will have a field day with this. We're not just going to divorce him, we're going to flay him." While Delilah's team of financial bloodhounds began their digital hunt, Annalise turned her attention to the more personal front of her campaign. She knew that to truly break Julian, she had to attack his ego, the most fragile and inflated part of him. Her next move was subtle but devastating. Through a discreet public relations firm, recommended by Delilah, she leaked a story to Page 6, the Bible of New York gossip. The item was carefully worded, a masterpiece of insinuation. It spoke of a beloved philanthropic power couple on the brink of collapse. It hinted at a brazen, flame-haired mistress and a symbolic betrayal that has left the beautiful expectant wife reeling. It didn't name names, but in their rarefied world it didn't have to. The city's elite would know exactly who the column was about. The fallout was immediate. Annalise's phone, which she had set to silent, lit up with calls and texts from concerned friends. Julian, predictably, was furious. He left a string of increasingly unhinged voicemails, alternating between threats and pathetic pleas. Annalise listened to them with a detached sense of satisfaction, then forwarded them to Delilah's legal team. That she moved on to the art. Julian's collection was his pride and joy, a tangible representation of his wealth and supposed sophistication. It was also, as Annalise knew, almost entirely in her name. In the early days of their marriage, in a move designed to protect his assets from potential business liabilities, he had purchased and registered the entire collection, the Monet, the Warhol, the Basquiat, under Annalise Varenne. He had seen it as a clever legal maneuver. He had never imagined she would be the liability. Annalise contacted Sotheby's, her former employer. She spoke to her old boss, a man who had always been fond of her and had been disappointed when she'd left. She explained in vague but compelling terms that she was entering a new chapter of her life and wished to liquidate some of her assets. The timing was perfect. The fall auction season was approaching. The press release from Sotheby's announcing the private collection of Annalise Varenne for sale was a bombshell. It listed the key pieces, their staggering estimates, sending shockwaves through the art world. For Julian, this was a public castration. His friends, his business partners, his rivals. Everyone would see that his precious art collection was being sold off by his estranged wife. It was a direct hit to his reputation, a sign that the great Julian Croft was losing control. But Annalise's masterstroke was yet to come. It involved the Mistress. The woman she now knew was named Kendra Vance, no relation to her lawyer, a fact that provided a moment of dark cosmic humor. Annalise had Marco and his team do a thorough but discreet investigation into Kendra. The results were both predictable and useful. Kendra was a former model turned brand consultant, a profession that seemed to involve accompanying wealthy men to exotic locations. She had a taste for the finer things in life and a significant social media presence, a curated feed of luxury travel designer clothes and cryptic captions about living her best life. Annalise studied Kendra's Instagram feed like a general studying a battlefield map. She saw photos taken on the terrace of a hotel in Interlaken, posted during the time Julian was supposedly in Geneva. She saw a picture of a new Cartier watch, a gift from a special someone, posted a week after Julian had claimed a late-night board meeting. Kendra wasn't just a mistress. She was a braggart, and her vanity would be her undoing. Annalise's plan was audacious, and it required a key piece of information: the location of the ring. She knew Kendra would be flaunting it. After the gala, the woman had become bolder, posting a blurry photo of her hand on a man's chest, the 7-carat diamond deliberately in focus. The opportunity came in the form of the annual Serpentine Summer Party, a major event on the international social circuit held in London. Julian was a co-chair of the event. It was the perfect stage. Annalise knew he would be there, desperate to project an image of normalcy and control, and she knew he would bring Kendra. It was his style, arrogant, defiant, and stupid. Annalise would not be attending. Her revenge would be delivered remotely. She booked a suite at the Connaught, her favorite London hotel. She flew in 2 days before the party, her baby bump now a prominent, undeniable statement of her reality. She met with a specialized team that Delilah had arranged, a group of former British intelligence officers who now ran a high-end corporate espionage firm. Her instructions were precise. They were to infiltrate the Serpentine Party. They were not to approach Julian or Kendra. Their mission was focused on one thing, and one thing only: the ring. "I don't want it back," Annalise told the lead agent, a man with pale, watchful eyes. "I want it documented. I want high-resolution, undeniable proof that she is wearing it at this event with him. I want video, I want photos. I want to be able to see the hallmark inside the band." The night of the party, Annalise sat in her hotel suite, a live feed from her team displayed on a large screen. She watched as Julian and Kendra arrived, a tableau of smug defiance. Kendra was stunning in a silver gown, her red hair a fiery beacon, and on her finger, sparkling under the lights of the paparazzi flashbulbs, was Annalise's ring. Annalise's team was flawless. A waiter with a camera in his tie pin, a woman pretending to be a tipsy guest, stumbling into Kendra and getting a close-up shot with her phone, a long lens camera from a concealed position across the lawn. They captured it all. The ring on Kendra's finger as she held Julian's hand, the ring as she lifted a glass of champagne to her lips, the ring as she gesticulated animatedly in conversation with one of Julian's business rivals. But the final piece of the plan was the most vicious. Annalise had learned that Julian was in the middle of closing a massive career-defining merger with a conservative family-run Japanese tech conglomerate, a company run by the elderly traditionalist Mr. Tanaka. The deal was worth billions and was in its final delicate stages. Mr. Tanaka, as it happened, was the guest of honor at the Serpentine Party. Annalise waited until she saw her team's footage of Mr. Tanaka shaking hands with Julian. Then she gave the signal. She had hired a translator. She had drafted a letter. And she had prepared a package. The package contained the high-resolution photos and video of Kendra wearing the ring at the party. It also contained a copy of Annalise and Julian's wedding announcement from Vogue, with a beautifully captioned photo of the very same ring on Annalise's finger. It included a brief, elegantly worded note translated into perfect Japanese. The note, written from the perspective of a concerned friend of the Croft family, expressed deep worry over Mr. Croft's erratic and dishonorable behavior. It spoke of the deep shame of flaunting a mistress wearing his pregnant wife's sacred wedding ring in front of a respected business partner. It didn't ask for anything. It simply presented the devastating, undeniable facts. The package was delivered by a discreet courier to Mr. Tanaka's hotel, the Dorchester, at midnight. Annalise turned off the live feed. She stood and walked to the window, looking out over the sleeping city of London. She felt no joy, no triumph, just the cold, grim satisfaction of a plan perfectly executed. She had used Julian's own arrogance, his own tools of wealth and power against him. She had turned his public stage into a platform for his own humiliation. The symphony of destruction was reaching its crescendo. The financial ruin was coming. The social disgrace was in motion, and the final crushing blow was about to land. She placed a hand on her belly, feeling the strong, steady kick of her child. This was her new empire, and its foundations were being built on the scorched earth of Julian Croft's world. The call came 2 days later. Annalise was back in New York in her war room finalizing the details of the Sotheby's auction with a representative. Her phone buzzed, displaying a number she didn't recognize, but the London country code was unmistakable. She excused herself and took the call. It was Mr. Tanaka's chief of staff. His English was formal, precise. "Ms. Varenne," he began without preamble. "Mr. Tanaka extends his deepest apologies for the dishonor you have faced. He has reviewed the information that was brought to his attention. The merger with Croft Enterprises has been terminated effective immediately. Mr. Tanaka believes that a man who shows such profound disrespect to his own family cannot be a trustworthy business partner. He wishes you and your child health and peace." Annalise closed her eyes, a single slow tear tracing a path down her cheek. It wasn't a tear of sadness, but of vindication. It was the first tear she had shed since that night at the gala. It was a release. The first domino had fallen, and it was a domino the size of a skyscraper. The news of the failed merger hit the financial world like a thunderclap. The stock of Croft Enterprises, already shaky from the rumors of Julian's marital strife, plummeted. It dropped 20% in the first hour of trading, then 30%. Analysts on Bloomberg and CNBC were scrambling, speaking of a catastrophic collapse of confidence in Julian Croft's leadership. His carefully constructed image as an invincible Midas touch dealmaker was shattered overnight. Julian, who had flown back from London in a panic, was now in full-blown meltdown. His voicemails, which Annalise continued to archive as evidence, had devolved into a pathetic mix of rage threats of financial ruin against her and desperate, tearful pleas for forgiveness. He was a cornered animal lashing out in every direction. But Annalise was insulated from his chaos. Delilah Vance had moved swiftly, obtaining a restraining order that barred him from coming within 500 feet of the penthouse, or of Annalise herself. The locks were changed. The security team was a constant, silent presence. He was locked out of his home, his company was in free fall, and his reputation was in tatters. The final act of Annalise's revenge was designed to be the most personal, the most psychologically devastating. It was scheduled for the day of the Sotheby's auction. The auction room was packed. The art world cognoscenti wealthy collectors and museum curators were all there, eager for a chance to acquire a piece from the now infamous collection of Annalise Varenne. But there was another element in the room. The press. Annalise, through her PR firm, had ensured that journalists from every major news outlet were present ostensibly to cover the high-profile sale. In reality, they were there to witness the final humiliation of Julian Croft. Annalise was not there in person. She watched via a private live stream from the comfort of her penthouse, a cup of calming chamomile tea in her hand. She had done her part. Now she would watch the pieces fall. As the auction began, the first piece on the block was a small, intimate Warhol sketch of a soup can, a piece Julian had bought for her on their first anniversary. It sold for 3 times its estimate. The next, a vibrant Chagall, also soared past its expected price. The bidding was frenetic. The provenance of the collection, now tied to such a juicy high society scandal, had made it even more desirable. But the main event, the piece everyone was waiting for, was the last lot of the collection, Monet's Nymphaeas. The very painting Julian had failed to acquire the day he met Annalise. He had bought it for her a year later, surprising her with it on her birthday. A grand romantic gesture meant to symbolize that he could and would get anything he wanted. As the auctioneer introduced the Monet, a hush fell over the room. The painting, a swirling masterpiece of water lilies and reflected light, was projected onto a large screen. The bidding started high and climbed rapidly. 1 million, 2 million, 5. The numbers flew back and forth between 2 determined phone bidders. Then, just as the bidding reached $8 million, a commotion was heard at the back of the auction room. The press cameras swiveled in unison. It was Julian. He looked like a man who had been dragged through hell. His suit was rumpled, his face was pale and unshaven, his eyes wild with desperation. He had clearly violated the restraining order to be here. He stumbled into the room, pushing past the security guards who tried to stop him. "Stop!" he yelled, his voice cracking. "Stop the sale. That's my painting. This is all my property." The room erupted into chaos. The auctioneer banged his gavel, trying to restore order. The journalists surged forward, their cameras, flashing their microphones, extended to capture every second of the breakdown. Julian's eyes scanned the room, searching, lost. "Annalise!" he screamed, his voice now raw with anguish. "Annalise, please don't do this." He looked directly into one of the press cameras, as if he knew she would be watching. And in that moment, the arrogant billionaire, the powerful titan, the king of his own universe, finally broke. His face crumpled. Sobs, deep and racking, tore through him. Tears streamed down his pale, stubbled cheeks, unabashed and pathetic. He sank to his knees in the middle of the crowded, silent auction house, a king weeping amongst the ruins of his plundered kingdom. "I'm sorry," he whispered the words, choked by tears. "I've lost everything. I've lost you. I'm nothing without you. Please, come back." He looked up, his eyes pleading, not at the auctioneer, not at the crowd, but at the cold, impersonal lens of the camera. He was speaking to her and to the entire world. The image of the weeping millionaire, brought to his knees by the wife he had scorned, was instantly broadcast across the globe. In her silent penthouse, Annalise watched the screen, her face impassive. She felt a profound, aching sadness, not for him, but for the woman she had been. The woman who had loved him so completely, so naively. She felt a pang for the love she had thought was real, for the future she had thought they would share. But that woman was gone. She reached for her phone and sent a single text message to Delilah Vance. "It's done. File the papers." Then she stood up and walked over to the large window overlooking Central Park. The late afternoon sun cast a golden glow over the city. Below, life went on indifferent to the dramas of the wealthy and powerful. In the park, children were playing. Couples were strolling. A new world was waiting. She placed both hands on her belly, on the new life that was her future, her real legacy. The empire of Julian Croft was a heap of smouldering ash, but hers, the empire of Annalise Varenne, and her child was just beginning to rise. She was free, and for the first time in a very long time she smiled a genuine, peaceful smile, feeling the gentle, reassuring kick of the future within her. The revenge was complete. Now it was time to live. And there you have it, a story not just of betrayal, but of resurrection. Annalise's journey shows us that the deepest wounds can forge the strongest weapons, and that a woman's power, once unleashed, can topple any empire. She didn't just get even. She rewrote the rules of the game and built a new kingdom from the ashes of a broken heart. Her victory wasn't just in Julian's tears, but in her own quiet strength as she turned to face a future she alone would command. What did you think of Annalise's ultimate revenge? Was it justice, or was it too cold? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you were captivated by this story of love, betrayal, and epic revenge, please hit that like button. Share this video with someone who loves a good drama, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel for more unforgettable stories. Don't miss out on what's coming next.